A lot of furniture parts move throughout the mill every day, and pallets are a handy way to move a whole bunch of parts for a little bit of effort. But it's extremely important to know how to properly stack parts onto pallets. Some pallets can weigh over 1,000 pounds, and if stacked poorly, there is an increased risk for damage to the products, personal injury, or even death. Our objective is to minimize load leaning and ensure structural integrity of the material stacks throughout the manufacturing process. Before we begin, it is crucial to know which type of pallet to use. Track pallets are smaller and have ribs on the bottom to make them easier to push along the roller tracks, while shipping pallets are bulkier and have room for a forklift to slide its forks underneath. So be sure to grab the right one for the parts you will be stacking. If you don't know which pallet to use, ask your supervisor. Prepare the pallet by ensuring it is clean, dry, and defect-free. It is important to note that shipping pallets are not designed to roll freely along the roller tracks, and adding hundreds of pounds of furniture parts can make it physically impossible to move the load. So whenever a shipping pallet is required, be sure to place a track pallet underneath the shipping pallet in order to ensure ease of movement to the next workstation. Begin by adding a layer of evenly spaced wooden spacers, also known as stickers, on top of the pallet's surface. This will add a layer of separation between the furniture parts and anything on the pallet that might damage the parts, such as protruding screws or gouges. Place your first furniture part on top of the base layer of wooden stickers. The size of the part will determine how many can be arranged on the first layer. Pallets with smaller parts like the ones shown here can clearly hold a higher quantity of parts, whereas a single large part can take up the entire pallet. Regardless of the size of the parts you are stacking, you must be sure they are centered on the pallet. Too much overhang in any direction can cause the entire stack to tip over. For parts that overhang the pallet by more than a few inches, even when centered, you will want to expand the pallet's workable surface area by adding a flat. A flat is usually a large, clean piece of plywood that can be centered on the pallet to provide a much larger stackable surface area. For the rest of our example, we will use these mid-sized drawer parts. This experienced worker knows that taking the time to center the first layer and ensure the parts are snugly fit side by side will save him a lot of hassle later on. Now that he is satisfied, he begins to stack additional layers of parts on top of his first layer. With each additional layer he stacks, he makes sure to place the parts directly on top of the previous layer. You'll notice he is stacking two parts at the same time to speed up the process, but he always pauses after placing each layer to make sure the new layer's edges line up evenly with the previous layer. This will ensure his finished pallet is stacked as straight as possible with little to no overhanging parts. He stops to confirm that he has stacked his parts 20 layers high before adding another layer of wooden stickers and continuing the process of stacking more parts. The wooden stickers act as structural support to prevent the load from tipping over in transit or if bumped into. He does this every 20 layers because he is stacking medium-sized furniture parts. If he were stacking smaller parts, he would need to implement a layer of wooden stickers for every 10 layer of parts. If he were stacking larger parts that take up more than 60% of the pallet's surface, he would not need to use any additional wooden stickers in the process. When placing each wooden sticker, be sure it is in line with the previous stickers below and does not protrude too far from the stack. Stickers that stretch beyond the stack can become a physical hazard to people walking by and can also tear clothing rather easily. Per regulations, a pallet can be stacked to a maximum height of 60 inches when measured from the concrete floor to the top layer of the pallet. If it is taller than the maximum 60 inches allowed, then the pallet will need to be downstacked until it is 60 inches or less. To ensure compliance with this regulation and avoid the extra work involved with downstacking, the height of the pallet is checked with a calibrated measuring tape before going any further. Once you have confirmed that the pallet is less than the 60-inch maximum height, perform a visual inspection of the stacks to make sure the parts are neatly stacked and not leaning. And although you should have been counting as you stacked parts in groups of 10 or 20, you are still required to perform a final count of the furniture parts on the pallet. To do this properly, begin with the top layer of parts and physically touch each part as you count downward toward the bottom layer of parts. Touching the parts with your finger as you count ensures that you are less likely to skip over or double count a layer of parts by mistake, which would be much more likely to occur if you were counting with only your eyes. Be sure you do not include any of the wooden stickers in your count. Once you have counted the last part, write the number down on a piece of paper. Then, count the total number of parts that make up the bottom layer, including the last part you touched when you counted the layers from top to bottom. Write down the number of parts that make up the bottom layer and multiply it by the number of layers that were previously counted from top to bottom. This should be the number of parts currently stacked on the pallet. However, the counting process is not over yet. Because mistakes can be a common occurrence, you are also required to count the parts again, except this time in reverse. Starting at the bottom, count the total number of layers that make up the pallet. Again, be sure to physically touch each part as you count upwards towards the top layer. When done, write the number down on a piece of paper, and then count the total number of parts that make up the top layer. Multiply this number with the number you counted when counting from bottom to top. The first two numbers you counted and multiplied while counting from top to bottom should match the second set of numbers you counted when counting from bottom to top. If they do not match, you are required to begin the counting process over again. Record any relevant details, such as the date, your numerical employee code, stack quantity, and any other notes or special considerations on the load's paper ticket, and affix the ticket to the load. Regardless of the pallet's next destination in the mill, always cover the finished load with a sheet of plastic. The protective layer will help to prevent catastrophic damages caused by rising and falling humidity levels in the mill. So what have you learned? Let's review. Always use a clean, undamaged pallet that is suitable for the part's destination. Parts must be stacked on their pallet in a neat, organized stack with a stable base, and must not be taller than 60 inches from the concrete floor. Use wooden stickers at the beginning of the stack and every 10 or 20 layers depending on part size in order to maximize stability and provide for consistent counting. Avoid using extra long wooden stickers that impede the walkways, and always double-check the quantity of parts on any single pallet by counting the load twice. We hope you have learned enough of the basics of pallet stacking to be able to excel at your job here at DCI.